In keeping with the theme of free speech, I thought today we would address a few comments that the Woolly Bumblebee makes in her video on the subject. Now, for those that don't know, I've had many interactions with the Woolly Bumblebee, all of which positive. In fact, she contributed towards one of my very favourite videos, which is simply called Shut Up Wesley, where Will Wheaton actually said on Twitter, anyone who tells him to shut up Wesley will be auto-blocked. So I asked many shitlords to contribute towards a collaborative Shut Up Wesley. The Woolly Bumblebee contributed, and I'm eternally grateful for it because it's a very funny video. I'll link it below if you want to hear some really bad audio and editing. Now, for whatever reason, in the near 18 months since I made that video, people's opinions, people's views, and channel directions have changed. The Woolly Bumblebee is no exception, and I want to address some of her very questionable perceptions on free speech because she has switched from what was once somebody that could have been regarded as anti-SJW and become SJew. I don't get it. But I'm going to address these comments and see if I can make sense of it. Maybe be skeptical. That's unlikely. But we can try and make sense of some of the things she says. And I don't mean this in a malicious way, but having seen your video already, I do believe you're wrong on a few issues.
Today we are going to look at free speech because I am so sick and tired of hearing things from like Sargon of Akkad and Vernaculus and that guy T and a whole bunch of other fucking idiots that people like Millennial Woes and Richard Spencer, these white nationalist, white supremacist, ethno-nationalist, identitarian, alt-right, fascist pieces of shit, that they are somehow pro-free speech.
That is an awful lot of labels for a pair of tosspots. And in this instance, I mean Richard Spencer and Millennial Woes, not Sargon of Akkad, That Guy T, and Vernaculus, who you could just ignore instead of bringing up or watching. Then again, as they all have rather large audiences, it's not surprising you'd want to call them out on whatever it is they've done wrong. But if I recall correctly, I've seen you involved in many instances of disagreement with Sargon of Akkad, the most famous one I remember being that social justice course petition, which if I remember rightly was framed pretty poorly, so you may have had a point. But it was hard to tell then if you were disagreeing with him because of that, or whether it was just because it's Sargon of Akkad.
And they keep saying this over and over again, you know, you gotta let them talk, because those are the free speech warriors. Those are the people who really care about free speech. You must let them speak.
Has Sargon of Akkad, Vernaculus, or That Guy T said it? If they did it in a tweet, I wouldn't have noticed, but if they did it in video form, I think I might have, unless it was done during a video that I watched in a drunken stupor, which is random, odd, and rare. For the most part, with those that I know that are very anti-SJW, it's not so much that they should be allowed to speak because they are the champions of free speech, which is something Steve Shive said in my last video. It's more that people should just be allowed to speak because they have a right to speak. Their ideas are irrelevant. They're just words, for God's sake. They're not the ones resorting to violence, after all. Oh yes, but their ideas are toxic and they could lead to violence. But they're not the ones throwing the tantrums or being violent preemptively.
I swear to God, every time I see this or hear it, I'm just like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, how stupid can you be to think that these people, like Millennial Woes and Richard Spencer and the like, are pro-free speech? Okay,
so there are 3 points I want to quickly make. 1, God's not real. That particular turn of phrase is therefore irrelevant. Super skeptic. 2, how stupid do you have to be? Well, I'd have to ask somebody who is as stupid enough to delete a channel after receiving many threats to then only come back and start drama again with the very people that she blamed in the first place. No offense intended here, but you did just delete a channel and come back and immediately start drama again. And 3, the only way you'd know for certain would be to ask Millennial Woes or Richard Spencer. Millennial Woes and Richard Spencer have both had discussions with people like Roaming Millennial. If you're so keen to discuss it, why not discuss it directly with those people, like Roaming Millennial does when she disagrees with people?
I mean, sometimes I have to wonder if these people who are saying this, like, you know, like I said before, like Sargon and Vernaculus, That Guy T and all these people, like, I seriously have to wonder if they have brain damage.
Well, rather than wondering whether or not they have brain damage, why not use your platform, i.e. Twitter, and simply ask them, Just type, no context, are you brain damaged? That should do it.
Because this isn't rocket science. They're not pro-free speech at all. They fucking can't be. And so let's go over this so that maybe these morons can understand why that is.
I never quite understood how rocket science was always lumped in as a comparison or a valid comparison to something else that could be considered complicated or simple, but that doesn't matter. Instead, I'm going to accept, for the sake of this video, the title of moron. Please explain to me the concept of free speech and how Richard Spencer and millennial woes are not for free speech.
So can someone be for true free speech and believe in white supremacist, white nationalist, neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic, identitarian, or ethno-nationalist ideologies?
Do you think that it is a mainstay argument of white nationalists or white supremacists or neo-Nazis or identitarianists, whatevers? Do you think it's a prerequisite to be anti-free speech to be a member of each of those groups? Or to be a member of one of those groups, even though a couple of them sound like the same bloody thing?
First, you have to understand that white supremacy is the foundation upon which all of these other types of racist beliefs are built.
Someone should tell that to President Zuma in Africa when he wants to take away the land from the white people like Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. Notice how racism isn't exclusive to white people here. Oh, and if President Zuma wanted to speak near me on a campus, I'd be okay with it because I want to hear what he has to say on the subject of nationalism. More importantly, the idea that taking away land from white people who were born, raised, or reside in his country is a good thing.
Specific groups may differ on things such as who they will tolerate or not, who is considered to be truly white, who their main enemies are, or how to ultimately achieve their utopian goals.
On the subject of whiteness, or white credentials, I'm not entirely sure what constitutes real whiteness, true whiteness, the right kind of white. Again, I recommend asking somebody who is a white nationalist, or a white supremacist. Maybe that would be more appropriate. You still have the KKK in America, right? By the way, this comment about true whiteness was the first moment where I started to wonder whether or not this entire video was a troll or not.
But they all rest upon the same core belief and the promotion of that belief, which is that white people are superior in certain characteristics, traits, and attributes to people of other racial backgrounds, and that white people should politically, economically, and socially rule over non-white people.
None of what you've said so far has any impact on free speech. Now, there are studies that do show white people have certain traits and characteristics that are superior to other people of other races, much like anyone else from any other race has a superior characteristic or trait that is indicative of that race, and they hold that superiority over white people or black people or certain types of Asian people. That has been shown to be somewhat true. Much like there are inherent weaknesses to being white or black or a particular type of Asian. Now, as far as that last little comment goes about superiority or dominance over people of colour, I haven't heard Richard Spencer or Millennial Woes say this. Of course, I could be wrong, because I haven't listened to them as much as you may have if you have at all. But I have heard someone say it. In fact, myself and Skeptic Llama were going to make a video together on him. Now, he has since deleted the video off his channel, but it's okay. I've got the video. His whole point essentially boils down to the idea that people of colour should not be allowed to be in positions of power because they commit the highest amount of crime. Astonishing, right? Now, he does use what he calls evidence to back it up, and at some point I may get round to making that video, but it's not relevant just now. I'm just using it as a point that Millennial Woes and Richard Spencer didn't say it.
So white supremacy is rooted in scientific racism, relies heavily on pseudoscientific arguments, skewed research, and faulty statistics, and sees multiculturalism and equality as a serious threat to the white race.
Do you have any evidence to back this up? In the description to this rant, you don't cite anything. And we all know how anti-SJW types like evidence, they like sourcing. So if they are themselves, since you've addressed this to Sargon, Vernaculus, and that guy T, are there any instances when they've provided evidence that could be considered racist scientific research or skewed evidence, biased sourcing? You've made a video attacking them for supporting others, and you've called them certain names or said that they do not support free speech because of, and then you've listed your reasons eventually. But at no point have you provided any evidence to support it. You've just made these blanket assertions, which is all they are. They're just assertions.
Regardless of the label one uses, all of them are rooted in white supremacy. I hope the idiots are following along, because this should be fairly simple to follow. But then again, for some people, apparently it's not that simple, is it?
Well, I can confirm that I, as an idiot, am following along quite easily, but have yet to see you prove your point. This is key here. You can say whatever you want, but if you're going to make a claim that those that support certain ideas adhere to certain methods, you need to prove it, rather than blindly assert it. You know this from your time in the anti-SJW community, or the skeptic community, if you want to call it that. It's funny how far you've fallen down the rabbit hole, really, in this instance.
So, because their core ideology dictates that whites are the superior race in one way or another, and that they, whites, are to rule over non-white people, they cannot possibly be for free speech.
Much like my previous answer, I have to ask you to prove it. I have watched a considerable amount of Millennial Woes content, and I have listened to some of Richard Spencer's speeches. I don't recall any of them saying anything like this. I also have never heard Sargon of Akkad, Vernaculus, or that guy T defend them for saying it. So why are you targeting them for that as well? And finally, can you prove people who say they are white supremacists or believe in white nationalist ideas or identitarian ideas or whatever are anti-free speech? Because you've not done it yet.
What they are is for their speech. White people's speech.
Let's remove white people from this for a second, and white supremacists, white nationalists, and all the other labels you conjured up earlier. I have yet to hear anyone on the right say that, or say they are against free speech at all. But I have heard people that you have been associating with, those very disgusting, despicable people who go out of their way to cause so much drama for views rather than address any legitimate issues, openly call for censorship. Most famous being Steve Shives, who I have no doubt you will one day start canoodling with while his wife pegs him.
And don't forget, it also has to be the right kind of white person.
And yet that particular statement holds no value when you consider Roaming Millennial had Richard Spencer on for a stream, and Millennial Woes. She's not the right kind of white if they are indeed white supremacists. Now I have a question for you, something to do with consistency on the subject of supremacy and nationalists. You've made it a point to bitch about white nationalists and white supremacists, identitarians, ethno-state, blah 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 blah. Do you apply that same kind of annoyance towards black nationalists, and so on? Because ethno-nationalists aren't exclusive to areas that were or are predominantly white populated, or have a larger population of white people.
Plenty of Jews are white-skinned, but are not considered white by many of these groups. So you do indeed need to be the right kind of white in order to be considered to have any rights under their belief system.
Am I the only person who thinks that the language being used by Wooly in this video can quite easily be used to suit a more feminist rhetoric, if you remove Jew, of course, and the white supremacy and replace it with apologist?
Now, you also must believe in the same things that they do in order to benefit from their idea of quote-unquote free speech.
See? The language style she is now using, or is employing, is too similar to feminist rhetoric for me to take you even remotely seriously, and I have been wondering if you're a troll in this or not. Those of us that make response videos or make videos that are social commentary, those of us that are critical of certain aspects of life, we make it a point to use evidence. You're not using evidence, you're essentially boiling it down to this is how I see it. But because you're doing it as that is how I see it, without providing any evidence, it is all just one massive insulting assertion. And you're doing it because you know it will get you attention. It's rather embarrassing, to be honest.
They do not tolerate dissenting opinions or criticism of their beliefs. They do not allow people who do not share their same worldview to enter into their space. They do not wish to hear other points of view because they consider those points of view to be counterproductive and detrimental to their ideology.
Just because someone may not tolerate, although you assume they do not tolerate, that particular position not falling in line with what they believe, does not mean they can stop it, because everyone has a legal right to speak freely. And I think this is the whole point you seem to miss. It doesn't matter what other people think. You get to speak because you are allowed to by law. There will not be some white supremacist, white nationalist state, and free speech is therefore suddenly changed to suit only their agenda. The only people I see pushing that are people you're associating with, and you've yet to prove anything you've said so far. Now, as I can't be bothered to sit here for the next 2 days breaking down the next 5 minutes of your video, I'm going to ask my audience if you would like me to make another part to this or continue with this video. Let me know in the comments. I will leave a pinned comment simply stating, do you want a part 2, yay or nay? And thank you all for listening.
You know that building place? That it's a building. It's lots of buildings. They have them all over the place where they have books in them, and like they have what's in books again? Words. Yes, words. Words are in books.
Breakfast.
They put them into books.
But they don't mean anything.
And you want to talk about feminists and feminism and how bad they are, and you don't know a fucking thing about what they believe.
Stupid! You're so